Hey, I'm Stick Figure Sam, and sometimes I take over the chain. Today, we're going over every single bias and explaining what it is. Let's go. Actor-observer bias is the tendency to attribute your own behavior to external factors while attributing others' behavior to internal factors. This means blaming your actions on circumstance, but blaming other people's actions on their character. Anchoring bias is a reliance on the first piece of information you encounter when making a decision, even if it's irrelevant or arbitrary. Opophenia bias, hope I said that right, is seeing meaningful patterns or connections in random or meaningless data. This is the opposite of Moneyball. Authority bias is giving undue influence to the opinions or actions of authority figures, even when they might be wrong. Availability cascade is a self-reinforcing process, where a group's belief gains more and more plausibility through repetition. Availability heuristics is making judgments based on information that's easy to remember. This is often influenced by recent events or vivid examples. Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, or frequency bias, is the phenomenon where one learns about a new thing and sees it everywhere. This is what happens when you want to buy a new car and suddenly you see it everywhere. Bandwagon effect. Real Madrid, 2017 Golden State Warriors, or whatever team Ronaldo is on. This is the tendency to do or believe things because other people believe or do them. Bias blind spot is the tendency to see oneself as less biased than other people. Choice supportive bias is the tendency to remember one's choices better than they actually were. Your grandpa, who hiked both ways uphill, cured cancer and won a Nobel Prize? That's choice supportive bias. Cognitive dissonance is the discomfort you experience when you hold conflicting beliefs or attitudes. This leads individuals to resolve this conflict by changing their beliefs or attitudes. Confirmation bias is when you search, interpret, or remember information in a way that confirms your preconceived notions. I'm talking to you, flat earthers. The curse of knowledge is when you assume other people have the same level of knowledge as you, which leads to ineffective communication. This is what would happen if you talked to Magnus Carlsen about chess. The decoy effect is the introduction of less attractive options to make other options seem more favorable. Businesses often do this to make you buy more things. At McDonald's, the small, medium, and large soft drink are all $1, so of course you're going to get the large. But while you're at it, you check the app and you see an offer. It looks like a good deal, so you get it, but in reality, you may have spent more than you originally would have. The Dunning-Kruger effect is when you overestimate your own abilities when you don't know much about a subject, and you underestimate the abilities and knowledge of others. We often see this when somebody gets a new hobby or interest and they think they know a lot, whereas experts, who realize how much they don't know, often underestimate their abilities. Egocentric bias is the tendency to rely too heavily on one's own perspective when making decisions. Framing effect is drawing different conclusions from the same information depending on how the information is presented. Gambler's fallacy is believing that past events affect the probability of future events, even though they don't. This is especially common in random processes like gambling. The halo effect is when a person's positive or negative traits affect how they are perceived in other areas. Even though Ryan Reynolds might not know a lot about phones, because he's such a nice guy, people react positively to Mint Mobile. The hard easy effect is when people overestimate how easy it is to accomplish hard tasks and underestimate how hard easy tasks are. The construction on your freeway that's been going for the last 2.5 years, hard easy effect. Hindsight bias is the inclination to see events having been predictable after they have already occurred. This is like how I knew Dogecoin was going to the moon, I just forgot to invest. Illusory truth effect is the tendency to believe information is correct after repeated exposure. Illusory correlation is perceiving a relationship between variables that don't actually exist. It's true that when people eat more ice cream, more people drown. But this isn't because of ice cream, it's because more people swim in the summer and they also eat more ice cream in the summer. In-group bias is when you favor members of your own group over those from outside the group. Information bias is the tendency to seek information even when it cannot affect action. Mere exposure effect is when you develop a preference for things just because they are familiar. Moral credential effect is when individuals feel they have earned the right to be prejudiced after they have done something perceived as morally good. This is donating money to make a wish so you can go steal Girl Scout cookies. Next in line effect is when you forget what the person in front of you is saying because you are too focused on what you want to say next. Omission bias is the tendency to prefer inaction over action, especially when faced with morally challenging situations. The shame is that by not acting, the decision gets made for you. Optimism bias is believing that one is less likely to experience negative events and more likely to experience positive events when compared with others. Just like when I bought Bitcoin in 2009. I'm lucky, I didn't actually. Outcome bias is judging a decision based on its outcome rather than the quality of the decision at the time it was made. If a guru says 100 cryptocurrencies are going to the moon, but only 2 do, objectively, every one of those predictions was really bad, but they try to focus on the 2% of time they got it right. Overconfidence effect is when you overestimate your own abilities or knowledge. Ostrich effect is ignoring negative information and avoiding facing the consequences of one's actions. That's right, you're Joseph of Egypt. Peak end rule is when you judge your experience based on how it was at its peak, not how it actually ended. It's saying that you got an A in the class after the first assignment when in reality I had a D. Picture superiority effect is the phenomenon where pictures and images are more likely to be remembered than words. Proportionality bias is the tendency to believe there is a direct relationship between the size or importance of an event and the likelihood or impact of it happening. Winning the lottery would be awesome, but it doesn't make it more likely. Projection bias is assuming that others share our beliefs, attitudes, and values. Pygmalion effect is when higher expectations lead to an increase in performance. If you believe you're the big dog, you're more likely to be the big dog. Recency bias is giving more importance to recent events or experiences over older ones. Selection bias is a bias introduced by selecting a non-random sample from a larger population. Self-serving bias is attributing positive events to personal characteristics, but attributing negative events to outside circumstances. The serial position effect is when you remember the first and last items in a sequence and totally forget the middle. Spotlight effect is when you overestimate the extent to which others notice and evaluate our appearance, performance, and blunders. The truth is, people are much more focused on themselves than what you are doing. Survivorship bias is focusing on the successes or survivors and overlooking the failures or those who did not make it. Over 95% of new businesses are gone in just a few years, but we keep hearing how amazing it is because sometimes the few who make it make the most noise. Unit bias is when you want to finish something because you already started it, even if it's not the best use of time. Are you guilty of any of these? I know I am. Let me know what else you want to see below. This is Stick Figure Sam, taking over the channel and out.